Hello and welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Diana Havens and I will be your host for this TLC session, which is Homeless and Online, Who Are They and What Resources Would Help These Students Be Successful? And that is going to be presented by Dr. Maureen Lienau. We are excited that you have joined us for this presentation. The chat window will not be open during the session, but you will still be able to send me a message if you're having any technical issues. But we will open it up at the end for some Q&A. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Lienau.
Thank you, Diana. Thank all of you for attending today. This is a relatively new study. It was something that came out of something that I noticed in my own classroom. A number of students were telling me that they were homeless, and I was trying to figure out ways in which I could help them. So I think what I'm going to present here today could be a little bit enlightening for you to use in your classroom. So let's get started. Homeless and Online, what resources would help these students? When we created our quantitative survey, we used a little bit of deception. And that deception, when we asked the students, was about their finances and their housing issues. So just so you know, we used a slight bit of deception when we titled our survey for our students to take. We were optimistic that we would get at least 200 students to participate in our survey. So let's move on and see what happened. Okay, doesn't want to move forward. There we go. I do have to acknowledge that the research study was made possible by a grant from Ashford University's University Fellows Program. Now we're going to stop and take a poll. So, what percentage of the survey respondents had used a food bank, church pantry, or social services for food or housing? 17%, 29%, 42%, or 54%? Give you a few more seconds. Okay, let's stop our polling and we're going to pick up this question a little bit later. Can we do that, Diana?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I just need to get it off my screen. So let's move forward. The demographics, we thought it was important for us to figure out which students are we talking about. And again, because we used a little bit of deception, we had astonishing numbers of students who participated. Like I said, I thought we would get 200. We ended up getting over 1,700 students to respond to our survey. So we asked them how long they were a student. You can see the majority. I've just simply put the majorities down here. 56.98% had attended Ashford for a year or less. The majority were earning their bachelor's degree. Female, and I think if you were in Poppy Fitch's last presentation, you heard how strongly Ashford tends to be in terms of enrolling females. Marital status was almost evenly split between single and married. And of those that were single or married, the number of dependent children was at 1. That was the majority. Our students, the majority of participants, work full-time. The gross income of 48.27% of our participants was at the poverty level or below. And I think that's significant for you to realize who that we're dealing with when we're talking about students. They literally are a blown tire or a car accident away from perhaps being homeless. The mean age of our participants was 37 years. The majority had received a high school diploma. We only had 8% who indicated that they were veterans. The region of the US was primarily from the Southeast, almost 39% of our participants, which tends to reflect our Ashford student body anyway. The other thing that we asked about was what type of living situation, where the locale. Most of the students that majority of students at least, indicated a small city. We also asked where they did their homework. 82.92% indicated that they did their homework at home, which we're hoping that is a good sign for our students. We had survey questions, which I'm going to indicate, and feel free to take notes and ask questions later. In total, we had 1,711 respondents to our survey. So we're somewhat data rich. Did you have any challenges applying and or enrolling at Ashford? 9% indicated that they had some problems completing the FAFSA form. This is significant for me in two areas. One, what is happening to the students that have so many issues that they're not enrolling? And secondly, if any of you have ever looked at the FAFSA form, only high school graduates may indicate that they're homeless. No other students may indicate that they're homeless anywhere on the FAFSA form. Second was getting my transcripts, and we realized these are barriers to students even just applying and enrolling at Ashford. And we asked them again what barriers to successfully complete their courses they found. 31.74 indicated that financial resources was significant for them. Lack of a textbook came in third, and lack of Wi-Fi. And I think we hear this often as instructors in courses. My textbook hasn't arrived, I've lost my Wi-Fi. And I do want to add one more thing here as I'm talking. We conducted this survey before any of the hurricanes hit in Florida, Texas, and had any of the fires in California. So this may change significantly depending on when we survey students again. When you have difficulties that affect your education, who do you talk to at Ashford? We found, surprisingly, I'm sure it's not a surprise to faculty, that the majority of our students talk to their academic advisor first and foremost. Instructors were second. What's of note is that the student advocate helpline is at less than 1%. So again, we need to get this information out there that we do have resources that can help students. And as faculty, how can we help students get that information and get to the right person while they're at Ashford? Have you ever had to stop out? We found that almost 16% of students have had to stop out because they've had financial difficulties. I think this is significant when you look at that number. 256 students have had to stop out of our courses because they've had financial difficulties. Again, this may go back to the fact that they're living in a small city. If they've been evicted, they have nowhere to go. Hopefully they're stopping out as opposed to continuing on to their courses. But I think it's important to note that as faculty, we will have students who will be asking us about taking a leave or getting an incomplete, and what are things that we can do to help them. In the past 5 years, where have you lived? One of the reasons we decided to frame our survey around financial and housing needs is that most students, if they are homeless, perhaps would not identify to us, but secondarily, many of them would not even realize that they could be termed homeless. Living with my parents and siblings, that is homeless. Living with children at your parents or relatives is also homeless. Living with your spouse or partner and children, that's also homeless. So everything in yellow indicates homelessness. Couch surfing, free housing, emergency shelter. 43 of our students indicated that at some point they lived in a car or van or trailer. 21 indicated that they had slept in a park or a campground. How much money do you personally spend for rent, utilities, and internet? Anywhere between $500 and $1,499. That seemed to be the majority. Just to get an idea of what the expenses were for our students. This slide, I think, is going to be quite significant. Have you ever had any problems with your housing in the last 2 years? If yes, please explain below. We had over 1,000 responses. I had to do a hand calculation on this. Many were a simple yes or no, but many of the others included health. So 177 people responded. They had had problems with health, anywhere from caring for their parents, caring for disabled children or themselves. They were blind. They had their own issues. They were still waiting to hear from workman's comp or disability. Secondly was housing. 356 people responded that they had had issues in housing, anywhere from being unable to find affordable housing. They had a significant increase in rent. They were evicted, foreclosed, lost their home, high cost of house repairs, hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, divorced and lost home, loss of job, etc. And last was finances. 257 students indicated that they had had some form of job loss, went to part-time work, laid off in the summer, their hours were cut, low pay, couldn't find another job, high cost of utilities and Wi-Fi. Insurance was another factor for many of these students. Car repairs, waiting for support. Often there were problems with all three. So we often saw responses where health, housing, and finances were all intertwined. For instance, this example, problems with health caused me to lose my job and forced to move out of my apartment. And this next one, I'm just going to ask you to read that. It always saddens me when I read the level of persistence and resilience that our students have. So I'm going to give you a minute to read that last quote that I've provided. So you can see that our students do not have an easy road when they are enrolled at Ashford. I think they all want to get ahead. They want to do better in life, but there are many mitigating factors that stop them from being successful in their classes and even persisting to graduation. This is probably very hard for you all to see, and I apologize. But we want to find out to what extent you agree or disagree with the following statements. You can see that in the first, very top, strongly disagree affordable housing. I can afford housing in my community. Students did disagree, and yet others said that they have friends that they can stay with when they need. And others indicated in the yellow, they disagreed that if they have to, they would not stay in their car or van. On the opposite end of the spectrum, they strongly agreed that they had family that they could stay with and they could find affordable housing in their community. So they're kind of all over the spectrum in looking at this in terms of housing and affordability for them and their families. Who's the primary person you talked to when you were having issues with housing? Almost 50% indicated they would talk with a family member. You can see that even their advisor at Ashford was only at 1%, and they would talk to no one. 25% indicated they would talk to no one. I think that indicates that do we have people here on staff at Ashford that our students can talk to? Which of the following services have you ever used for housing or meals? And our students could answer more than once. I've, again, put in yellow those that were the most significant. Food bank, 22, more than 22% of our students had visited a food bank. Almost 18% had eaten at the church, had a meal or gotten food. And many of them had, 11% had utilized social services for housing or food in their community. So if we could bring the poll results back up. The correct answer was 54%. So congratulations to those of you who got that right. It's a tough one though.
And Dr. Lienau, you have a 15-minute warning.
Okay, thank you.
Just let me know when you want to close those results.
Sure. Trying to move on to my next slide. Doesn't like to go. Okay, my next slide, there we go. So then we asked students, what would they like on if we were to build a web page or a blog of community and national resources that would be helpful? Which ones would they like to have? Scholarships came in number one. Almost a fourth of our students indicated that that would be very helpful for them. Secondly was jobs. I think when students talk about the lack of housing, lack of good jobs, lack of good pay, this is where we see that this could be another area that we could provide a resource, a very valuable resource to students at Ashford. And then free Wi-Fi. This is something, obviously, I know myself when students tell me that their internet is down, I do send them all over the place to Walmart, McDonald's, Panera, the libraries, etc. So I think just building a very strong network of locations across the country for students to visit if their Wi-Fi does go down, just to give them options of things that they would be able to go and find, but especially adding scholarship area and jobs would be critical for the success of our students. And then the majority of the others, at almost 20%, they listed that all of the above would be important. So community health, counseling, etc. Which resources would be helpful for you to access at Ashford? Number one is full or partial tuition waivers. Our students felt that that was something that would be really helpful for them to have at Ashford. Secondly would be emergency grant funds. And you can understand with almost 54% of our students indicating some kind of emergency food or housing, that this might just help them be more successful or complete a course and be able to move on without any disruption to their current studies. And last, dedicated staff members working with students facing financial issues at almost 13%. So it's interesting that these three came up because I think, and certainly want to hear from all of you, if you believe these would be things that would be important. And I'd certainly like to find out from you if there are other things that your students have mentioned would be useful. You can see we asked them about book fee waivers. That also, there was some interest in that, as well as use computers, help with utilities, which can somewhat be involved with emergency grant funds as well. Medical didn't seem to resonate with too many of our students. And then we had some others that we have not yet been able to classify exactly what kind of help that they would like. Let me just go along here. And I do want to say one thing. I did have my co-PI on this is Dr. Gerald Kerwin, and I could not have done this without his help and support. So thank you, Gerald, if you're out there. Want to just mention the conclusions. Most of the respondents work full-time and earn 50% at the poverty level or below. 64% earn less than $32,000 a year. The majority of our respondents live in the southeastern part of the US, or I shouldn't say majority, but most of the students, almost 33%, were from this region alone. And most of respondents lived in rural areas, which can make finding jobs, housing, social services, and transportation difficult. So like I said, if they blow a tire out on their car, they don't have transportation, they may not be able to get to their job, they then may not be able to afford housing. 20% indicate some form of homelessness in the past 5 years. Barriers to successfully complete their courses are financial, Wi-Fi, and textbook. 15.5% stated they had stopped out of college because of financial difficulties. There are many, many issues around health, housing, and finances, and all three combined for our students. The cost of rent and mortgage is around between $500 and $1,500 per month. So if you're at the poverty level, imagine if you're putting out $1,500 for rent, utilities, Wi-Fi, et cetera. There's not a lot of money left over for books, insurance, food, et cetera. 54% of our respondents had used a food bank, church pantry, or social services for food or housing. And the things that students would find most useful are jobs, scholarships, and free Wi-Fi. And resources that our students would like Ashford to provide include tuition waivers, emergency funds, and dedicated staff members to talk to. So one thing, if there is one takeaway, we do have the Student Advocate Helpline here at Ashford. So if you could jot this down for your own further use, help@ashford.edu. This is the preferred method of referral. So if you're having a student with any kind of emergency situation, they are there to help students. Matt, I don't know if you're on. If you are, we would love to hear from you, or Poppy for that matter. You can also, if you're in-house, dial extension 24358 or 57. And if the concern is especially urgent and there's a safety issue involved. So I want to end here and thank you very much for coming. If there are any questions, please feel free. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And let's see. I'm not quite sure now, Dinah, how to put it on chat.
There should be at the bottom next to the share screen, it'll say there's a little chat button.
Oh yeah, there we go. Okay.
And Patricia had a question that she asked earlier, which you should be able to see. Does Ashford offer scholarships for low-income students?
Good. And who was Patricia?
Patricia Lake.
Okay. And do we have any referral for that particular resource? Who would they talk to?
They probably can reach out to their financial aid advisor.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not sure about scholarships though.
Okay. Hi, Jan. Does anybody have any questions? One of the things that Gerald and I plan to do is this is just phase 1 of our study. Phase 2 is where we actually want to start putting together those blog sources and websites so that students may access those. And Gerald has been talking about perhaps converting a course project into being able to do just that. So if any of you have any other ideas on ways in which we can help students, I think it would be great to share that in the chat.
Do you see that there are a couple questions? Are you seeing those? I just turned on so everybody can share to everyone.
More, hold on, there's a more button.
Might have been a delay. No, I turned it on. So Jackie Kiger said, Maureen, thank you. This is so very important and aligns in many ways with the Poverty Institute conference that most of the COE participated in last month. A very needed study, so thank you. And then Lori Wellner said, in defining homeless, are you using the information from the McKinney-Vento Act or other?
I'm using the homeless from, the federal government has about 3 different definitions depending on which agency you look at. So I looked at several and was able to get my definitions for how our students, and how we created the survey was by parsing out those definitions into individual pieces, such as living in your car or living with your children, with your parents. That those are all part of federal definitions. Does that answer your question, Lori?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And thank you, Jackie. Yeah, I think it will align very well with what the COE has been doing with the Poverty Institute as well. So I think next steps would be what kinds of things would we be able to share with faculty who are in a classroom, working with students who do say to you, hey, I'm going to be evicted next week. What kind of strategies could we create to help students? Where could we refer them? And as someone mentioned, that the helpline is for faculty to contact and refer students directly to them, and it's not to be given out to students. So thank you. Oh, one new
You
message.
just copied another question. I think it went to me privately and
Okay.
everyone, but so you can read it. I posted it in there for you.
I see Jackie's about the Ed Talks, the monthly drill down.
Yes, that's the one I copied.
Yeah. Is anybody willing to share in the chat what strategies they've used when students have mentioned to their faculty member that they are homeless or soon to be evicted? Is there anything that you found has worked well?
And if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you if you'd rather talk. And 4-minute warning for you.
Okay. Okay, Paula, great. Paula puts them in touch with their advisors and she reaches out to the helpline. Paula is one of our esteemed faculty in Denver. And so she works with students and faculty all the time. Any other strategy, Lori, Jackie?
I think that a couple of messages are still coming private. If you, on the 2, make sure it says to all panelists and attendees, or I'm sorry, all hosts and attendees or participants.
I think the hardest time I have is when students who I know have said they're being evicted, but we haven't reached that stage where they can take an incomplete in the class. It just absolutely is horrible because I cannot give a student an incomplete without having them meet that that standard of 67%. So I try and work with them so they can at least get to that point. Oftentimes, students have told me that they just cannot continue. They have other things that they have to attend to. And so it is just very difficult to work with students who are homeless. Oh, excellent. Yeah, lots of phone calls. Yes. And Jackie says a caring ear absolutely goes a long, long way. So Patricia wants a quick referral guide. And I think that's our hope that we're going to get there, Patricia. You can see that with this study, we don't know anything about students and just how many would be homeless or how many have used soup pantries or been evicted or how often their finances, health, and housing are all tied up together. So I think one of the things that we want to do is prepare blogs and websites that would be available to faculty as well as students at any point in time, so that it's not that we all have a lot of knowledge about maybe issues and supports that would be available for students in our own areas, but how can we put that together so everyone can add to this conversation?